There's a new study that shows drug overdoses have soared in the U.S. during the pandemic. Blacks had the largest percentage of an increase in 2020. American Indian or Native Alaskans had the highest rate of any group. Dr. Christopher Colbert is the Assistant Program Director of Emergency Medicine Residency at the University of Illinois, and he joins us from Chicago this morning. Okay, help me sort this out. Black people had the largest percentage increase in overdose deaths, more than close to 50%. What was it about the pandemic that affected us so much?
So this is very concerning. There is an observed increase in death and overdose, specifically in Black, Brown, and Native American population. There's a lot that attributes to that, and it's not specifically that of COVID, but COVID amplified these effects, that we really brought attention to these concerns, and that those concerns are transition secondary to increased potency of drugs, which translates to increased toxicity, what's considered polypharmacy, where more than one drug is used, and there's an increase in that used to get that euphoria from the use of illicit drugs, and most importantly, it's access to medical resources. If you're in a community in reference to and the concern of management of drug toxicity, your door to doctor time is huge, is so important. So for those communities, and specifically in Black, Brown, and Native American populations, that door to doctor time has a significant effect on patient outcome.
Dr. Colbert, the bottom line is you're seeing these people show up in your emergency rooms. My question is, we spend so much time talking about gun violence. How is it possible that we can be seeing the numbers that you're seeing and no one is talking about it this time?
Because as you even communicated earlier as well, it's a hierarchy of importance on what people choose to discuss. And at that time, and during this time, during a pandemic, the attention was brought on specific aspects. Now, mind you, there's inherent bias in my conversation because as an emergency room physician, we see it all that walks into the front door. So I can extend the conversation on many aspects of medicine, but when it came to specifically the number of deaths within the last 2 years, COVID specifically took the topic and chair of conversation.
Dr. Colbert, is this why I saw a commercial recently where there was one young woman talking to another young woman saying that she now keeps an emergency dose of naloxone in her purse because it can bring back her loved one to life? And I thought that is an unusual commercial, but it almost seems like this is a crisis that has slipped under the radar because we spent so much time talking about opioids. Are these just opioids, or are we seeing other types of drugs out there?
So there's two aspects to that great question. Number one, there's a second side to that coin. Having that conversation, expanding the dialogue on this topic, I was happy to see those commercials, because there are three different ways in which we could address these increase in numbers, and specifically for those deaths for those at-risk communities. Number one is prevention and conversation and education. Number two are harm reduction. And how do we define harm reduction? It depends on the different type of illicit drugs that are used. As an example, utilizing and providing resources for clean needles, the use of Narcan, it has a significant effect on just not the disease, the chronic disease of drug use, but also the burden of disease. And that's where it really gets into addressing these concerns. It's not just illicit drug use. It's what happens when those individuals utilize those drugs and come to the hospital for skin infection, heart muscle infection, and respiratory distress. So those commercials show that we're addressing these concerns and trying to mitigate the negative effects of this increased number.
Dr. Colbert, the study also showing that the overdose rate, the death rate for Black folks, higher than white folks for the first time since 1999.
Very much so. And this is concerning for two reasons. Number one, the percentage of African Americans and Latinx for the grand population is 13% and 8% relatively to the conversation. However, having that precipitous increase in those numbers demands the address of those concerns. And that's what we are trying to do moving forward. And in fact, policy is put in place to decrease those numbers and decrease those deaths.
Dr. Colbert, I did it again. I always make sure that I try not to do it. We laugh about it in the commercial break. Dr. Colbert is the Assistant Program Director of Emergency Medicine Residency at the University of Illinois in Chicago. Dr. Colbert, thanks for being with us.